right, while we're getting back to our seats, a quick plug. If any of you are interested in more advanced SAR topo training, our presenter from this morning, Eric, does offer that training course and is glad to help coordinate those with your team or your individuals.
Yeah, and I will for
All right, so let's get back into it. Our next presenter is going to be Dr. Robert Koester, or we know him as Bob. Bob first joined Appalachian Search and Rescue Conference in 1981. Since then, he has participated in hundreds of searches. He holds a Ph.D. in search theory from the University of Portsmouth and is the CEO of DBS Productions. His contributions to search and rescue include seminal research on lost person behavior with emphasis on dementia, the International Search and Rescue Incident Database, ISRID, and the tactical decision aid software, FIND. A search mission coordinator, instructor for Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and a past president of the Virginia Search and Rescue Council, Robert has also worked for the United States Coast Guard, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, National Park Service, Department of Homeland Security, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Author of numerous books, and hopefully one more, and articles on search and rescue. He has presented in Aruba, Australia, Iceland, Ireland, New Zealand, Poland, United Kingdom, and throughout the US and Canada, and now in Las Vegas. And he's here today to talk to us about advances in determining where to look.
Thank you. How am I supposed to look? I'm supposed to say this. Some of this work was supported with funding from the Science and Technology Directorate of the United States Department of Homeland Security. They paid a lot of money for that slide, and they want it read at every presentation I go to. So certainly in the past, when I have talked, I've always said it's all about the where. If you don't look where the subject actually is, you aren't going to find them. Recently, I decided I could even use bigger words because it's the where and the when, which we can call, you have to get the spatial temporal part of search and rescue right. So where? Obviously, if you go to the right place, but the subject isn't there yet, you're not going to find them. Although potentially that is a good place to set up an attraction and containment. So when they eventually get there, you will find them. When? Anytime you give directions or you want to meet somebody, you say, let's meet here at such and such time. So the time is important as well. If you get to where the subject is before they're there, you're not going to find anything. And if you get after they're there, you're not going to find anything. If you've went to where the subject actually was at some point, but they're no longer there, you can potentially find clues. And those clues will guide the search. And obviously, it takes being in the right place at the right time and searching with the 100% P.O.D. team to make the find. So ways to determine the probability of area or probability of containment if you're in the maritime world. We have three basic approaches. There is the subject matter expert approach. They're there because I say they're there. Or you could use a Matson consensus. They're there because we say they're there. There is a stochastic approach, which was well illustrated in the previous talk. We have a bunch of stats. We stack them all up together, different models, and we combine all those numbers, and then we get a combined sort of statistical model. They're there because that's what they did in the past. And the past is generally a good predictor of the future, as long as you got the right database. The third approach is an agent-based model approach. It's what's used by the US Coast Guard in SAROps. It's on the land side, out of the military. We have Landsar software. there are gobs of seems like so many PhD students and master's students. It's like, hey, I'm going to make a new computer-based model, but none of them are really ready for prime time. My preferred approach would be take all three approaches, combine them together, because each has strengths, each has weaknesses. Another concept, I was always kind of part of my class, but I'm trying to more formalize, get people to think, is probabilistic thinking. I don't know where the subject is. If I knew where the subject was, it would be called a rescue instead of a search. So by definition, I don't know where the subject is. A lot of people say, I'll advise on a search, and it's like, well, that could be here, 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 or here. And then they call me up and say, you were right. It's like, I was right. I told you 7 different things. So the fancy word for that is probabilistic thinking. So we have an 81-year-old with moderate dementia, high blood pressure, heart disease, arthritis, and she's overweight. She has wandered 3 times before, and all 3 times she was found in the facility. Currently, it's a degree above freezing. This is my way of getting around Fahrenheit Celsius. And the sun has just set. She's wearing a dress with a light sweater. She does not know the area at all. Where is the most likely area for her to be found? The facility. Yeah, of course. But what are the probabilities? Well, we can already see the 25% ring and the 50% ring on the map. 9% of the time she'll be found within 100 meters. 50% of there's the 25 percentile, 50% of the time within 15 meters of a linear feature, such as roads and creeks, 25% of the time found in the facility, 10% of the time just specifically a creek, and there's a 96% chance she is lost. But that means other scenarios do exist that could explain where she actually is. And this time, of course, she's not found in the facility, but she's found where the green dot is. Kind of the amusing part was it was a night search. The first team that was sent down that particular drainage found a sugar packet, and she was known to take sugar packets from the facility, stuff them in her pockets. So it's like, hey, this is an important clue. Sent a second team down that same drainage that same night, and she was found happily playing in the leaves, tossing them up in the air. So we obviously did not have the 100% P.O.D. team searching for us, but I don't know how they managed to find a sugar packet but missed her. But these things happen. So one of the things we want to avoid is what I call scenario lock. So that's a condition where a search planner settles on one scenario, and it could be probably the most probable scenario. I would agree. She was most likely going to be found in the facility. Of course, by the time I arrived at the search, she wasn't in the facility. Of course, I still insisted on another search of the facility, but I started looking at what are the alternatives. So I've certainly been working hard at growing ISRID. The information found in the Lost Person Behavior book and the Lost Person Behavior app all dates back to 2007 when I had 50,000 cases. In 2014, I updated the data. The database went up to 145,000 cases. That was funded by DHS and resulted in the Endangered and Vulnerable Adults and Children book, which I just call EVAC because it's a lot easier to say, and we love acronyms. And just recently, I have collected 300,000 traditional cases. So that's the triangle right there. But the US Coast Guard sent me 250,000 cases over 20 years with IPPs and fine locations. So I can say I'm like at 500,000 cases, which sounds dramatic. So looking at the US Coast Guard data that just came in, I FOIA'd, well, that's a 10-year period. They originally sent me 439 cases, but not all of those had fine locations. So just the ones with fine locations and the IPP, 231. They characterize things as international waters, territorial waters, the Great Lakes. And this is where I think it will have more impact on what we do, inland waters, rivers and creeks, and when they've searched on land. And since we do look in inland waters, I think a lot of this data will be applicable more to what we do, because I'm not going to try to tell the Coast Guard where they should look. Some of the incident types, oh, I just repeated that. I was going to probably show you this slide. So we have persons in the water is the most common, maydays, where they've run aground, so they are on the ground. Bridge jumpers. Well, it looks little. I mean, right here, there's 5,000. So that means that's over 1,000 cases of bridge jumpers. So that's a different kind of search than when somebody has entered the water from the center. People who get stranded on islands. We also have scuba diving incidents, aircraft crashes into the water. Actually, all aircraft incidents are really maritime incidents or land incidents, because you don't find missing aircraft in the air. Well, think about it. Persons in the water, actually kind of frozen water because they're on ice. Vehicles that go in the water, flooding, and aircraft ditching, some of the data. The data is now coming from every state of the US except South Dakota and Louisiana. Don't ask me why. I've certainly grown the number of countries that are contributing data, so it really is an international database. I'm waiting on 20,000 cases from my good friends from New Zealand. I have gotten data that was promised to me from New Brunswick, Alberta, Brazil. I was waiting on, well, I'm actually not waiting anymore, but I was promised from Taiwan. However, Finland, Virginia, and Massachusetts finally came through to me. So I'm no longer really actively seeking data, but if you have data and you want to send it to me, I'm happy to take it and get it clean. So this was when I jumped from the first book to the EVAC book. So the number of cases, this is dementia, went from like 95 in mountainous terrain to 1,200 in mountainous terrain. But we could actually see from 0.2 to 0.1, 0.5 to 0.6, 1.2, 1.6. Not really a big change. It kind of dampened my enthusiasm for running out and doing a new book. My enthusiasm right now is the 95 percentiles seem to change, which is not unexpected because the 95 percentile is actually based upon only 5% of the database. However, what has excited me is new subject categories. Now that I got more data, I can introduce new things. Instead of just saying, this is the missing aircraft, I can say, hey, if you're looking for a missing jet or a missing helicopter or a propeller, or if it had a hook, or if it had icing conditions, then these are the numbers you should be using. Base jumpers, now it's very important to differentiate between those in winged suits and those not in winged suits. My nickname for a winged suit, well, other than a suicide suit, is a squirrel suit, because now you have it, some of them have like glide ratios of 4:1. So now how far away that it can get from the IPP can be considerable. Lots of data from beacons. Pretty much have all of NOAA's data on beacons, and I'll talk about that on another slide. Adding the subject category of brain injuries. We often hear it as traumatic brain injuries, but in a lot of cases, somebody had meningitis or an illness that led to a very specific brain injury. Certainly we'll have data on cell phone forensics. With more data, I can break the age group previous 1 to 3 Now, age 1, age 2, and age 3 can be treated separately. I mean, one person is 3 times older than the other, so there are some differences in there. Adding a fugitive category, breaking the hikers into day hikers and overnight or backpackers. For human remains, the question is, if you find one bone, where are the rest of the bones? So I'm hoping, I have actually stumbled across 5 or 6 papers on the subject, and then hoping to get funding from somebody. There's lots of people sitting on lots of data who haven't organized it in the way we would normally want it organized for our purposes. Motorcycles, parachutists, usually parachutists whose parachute did not open is who we look for. Runaways, each of the scenarios treated as its own potential subject category. So evasive becomes a category, medical becomes a category, trauma becomes a category. When do you use them? I'll talk about. For waters, we can add the aircraft ditching, the bridge jumpers, the scuba divers, and persons in the water in ice. And then for wide area disasters, hey, which are going to increase due to climate change. So I got my climate change squeezed into my talk. We have avalanches, floods, fire, and landslides I have some data on. So of course, just generally speaking, there are missing people and lost people. Most of my emphasis has been on lost people, but you have to consider abductions as a probability, which can be trafficking, stranger abductions, family abductions, honor abductions, those seeking asylum, so they're trying to get away, but didn't tell people they were getting away. You have the runaways and throwaways. You have people fleeing because they don't want to be forced into a marriage. And then mental health can lead to missing people. And then we sort of have the traditional reasons why people get lost in the outdoors. Those are the various scenarios that could explain why we're out there looking for them. For cell phone forensics, you get 2 types of cell phone forensics information. One is you get the actual coordinate directly off the phone. Well, that's pretty darn simple. You go there and you will probably find the phone. However, in this particular case, the dude's phone was sitting in their parked car, but the dude was still a missing person. Other times you may get what looks like a polygon, and I'll show that in the next slide. If you have the intersection of 2 sites, it's like, well, the last time we heard something, it was sent to 2 towers. We know that. And the question I asked, it's like, okay, cell phone forensic analysts, you gave me a polygon. What percentage of the time are they actually found in the polygon? Well, based upon, I think it was 22 cases, half the time they were in the polygon and half the time they weren't in the polygon. It's like, okay, so my next question was, if they're not in the polygon, how far away from the polygon were they? Because I'm into like these 25% rings and 50% rings. So essentially 25% of the time, if they weren't in the polygon, they were only 73 meters away from it. So basically you can almost get 75% of your subjects, but you take your polygon and you expand your polygon 100 meters. In all directions. So this is basically how cell phone forensics works. You know what tower it came from. Fortunately, it usually has an offset distance or a ping distance, so it knows the time between the tower and when the signal comes back. So hey, we got the distance, but there's a little error, so we have to add a little bit more, subtract a little bit more. If the tower has like multiple antennas, here I did a traditional tower with 3 antennas on it. Now, hey, this would be what our cell phone forensics would tell us. If you have another tower, you can also get another ring, specifically knowing which antenna. And now where they intersect, we got our little diamond. Here was a case, 2 towers. bang right there. Here they did additional radio wave analysis, basically on terrain blocking. Would some of this be blocked? Yes and no. So now we have two kind of high probability areas, but we should probably apply our offset because this is where our find was right there. So our radio waves bend a little bit. And a lot of this analysis is done using line of sight. So here's a case where, okay, we had actually a huge polygon, but we had multiple hits, and we could see the subject was moving at 45 miles an hour, which tells us what? They're in a car. So then you look to see where a road is. And here's a road. Well, we don't find them in there because, the last signal had them just going out at 35 miles an hour. So follow the road and find their overturned Jeep right up a little bit further on the road. Just a little scenario analysis. With beacons, this could be a 406 beacon, or this could be an emergency sort of civilian beacon, think Spot or InReach. This is all the things that have to happen. One, the subject actually has to activate the beacon. Well, what can go wrong? They could forget the beacon. They can't figure it out. They can't reach it. They're unable to activate it. They're injured. They're unconscious. They're dead. All kinds of reasons you can't do it. Two, the beacon must have power. The battery could be too old, or active features like tracking or frequent messages can drain the battery on the send beacons. The beacon actually has to be able to get the GPS satellites. So it could be blocked by foliage, buildings, multipath, cliffs, mountains, ionosphere, and antenna placement. Then it needs to, so that's getting the GPS signals down. Then it has to send a signal back up. So it's the same issues. Some of the satellites are in low Earth orbit and are only present every so often. Then the satellite sends the alert to a ground station. For 406s and iridiums, that is no issue, because if the satellite can't see a ground station, it passes it on to another satellite who can then see a ground. But for the Spot system uses the Global Star satellite network, where they're essentially mirrors in the sky. Signal comes up, and it has to see a ground station. If it can't, sorry, no luck. Ground stations, 406, no real issues. With commercials, technically what they say on their websites is if you don't have an active subscription, you are out of luck. I haven't been able to find anybody whispering anything in my ear as to whether they would pass it on or not. One person at one point, who knows if it's still accurate, said the initial computer checks for the subscription first. If no subscription, it doesn't pass it on to the RCC. So no human would ever be aware of it. I don't know if that's true or not. I've asked, I've sent emails, I get ignored on that point. Position accuracy for 406 is 100 meters, or more technically to 4 seconds of latitude and longitude, the way they encode it. They send the degrees, then they send the minutes, and then they do an offset of 4 seconds. So the further north you are, the more accurate it will be. The closer to the equator you are, the less accurate will it be. And then the SAR people go out. So looking at some of the 406 data I haven't fully analyzed it yet because I'm doing a million things. Last 10 years worth of data, there were 3,378 in actual distress. NOAA was able to find what the find location was with a coordinate in 2,185 of those. In 2016, DAS got turned on. DAS uses GPS satellites. Those are MEOs, or mid-Earth. So they see a whole lot of the Earth at one time. And the DAS system is able to triangulate or trilaterate, if you want to use the fancy term, the location, and it's a whole lot more accurate than the Doppler. Of course, even better is if it has a GPS chip. That would be what's known as the E solution. But keep in mind with your E solution, even though the chip may know exactly where it is, the way the signal is sent back up to the satellites, you only get that 4 seconds of accuracy. So there's still lots of false alarms. So even in 2023, last year, the false alarm, only 1.3% were in actual distress. So, hey, I have lots of tables and charts and figures because that's what I do for the accuracy. These were the last 10 years ago. I will be updating all those charts and tables and put them in the new book when I get around to it. I have done a little bit, actually, I haven't done it. I've worked with data scientists from the University of Virginia doing a little bit of intelligent things. So the question was, in my book, when it comes to survivability, I only give you data based upon time. And time is certainly not the friend of the lost person, but I think we all know weather is probably another important factor. So using AI, I don't understand what's going on there. But I understand what's going on here. This is how important each of the various factors were other than time. So age, average temperature, the hottest temperature, the coldest temperature, whether it's a wilderness search or an urban search, the subject category, gender, and gender is all the way down here. So the ones I just mentioned are really the most important. Then we can take all this information, input it into a computer, and get a kind of individualized survivability curve. So that's something I'm working on. Then the same question, what are the important factors that affect the distances subjects actually travel? The old ring model or distance from the IPP. It's age, whether it's a wilderness search or an urban search, how long they've been missing, what year it is. So something's changing in how far people are going with time. So I have to look at that at some point. Latitude and longitude, I think it's just proxies for whether it was a dry domain or a temperate domain search. And way down here, we have rain and temperature max. So the grad students were like, really, like, we failed you, Bob. We thought we were going to show how important weather was on how far people go, and it's not important at all. And it was like, you didn't fail me. You told me something important, that I really don't have to take weather into consideration. And that actually makes my life a lot easier as a search planner. So here's various probability curves taken all the way out to the 5th percentile, i.e., how long do at least 5% of the subject types survive? So our skiers do the best. They're 50 percentile. Half of them are found alive, still out on day 8. Then they start to crash, and it goes down really fast. Our hikers and the hunter curve is pretty similar. They have the best long-term survivability, with 5% of them still being found alive out on like day 25, 26. I mean, if you got a tent and a sleeping bag and some cooking gear, you could potentially survive a long time. Our autistic folks and our dementia folks don't do so well. And that's probably not surprising to anybody in this room. We can get more detailed survivability models based upon age. And age does affect the distance people go. So those people over the age of 65 don't go as far. But I'm not going to put a separate chart in the new book. I'm just going to use the same chart. And you just get a little bonus. You draw the same 25 percentile ring, and you'll be happy to know you'll actually find 30% of the people in that ring. And for your 50 percentile ring, you get the bonus of finding 58% of the people. Now, it was kind of interesting. The 95% ring was almost exactly the same. So you get the same chance of statistical outliers with 65-year-olds as you do with less. For group survivability, I did certainly find that when people are lost by themselves, essentially the not found alive got to 13%, though, versus when people were lost in groups, it was only 3.6%. So you have almost a 4 times greater chance of a fatality in a solo subject than you do in a group. I mean, that was always part of, the search urgency charts. Physical conditioning, I thought physical conditioning would have an impact on how far people are. Let's just look at the 50 percentile because that's the most accurate. Excellent shape, 3 miles. Good shape, 3 miles. Fair shape, 2.7. Poor shape, 3 miles. That's crazy stuff. It's just another example of Bob being wrong. How about survivability? At least it should affect survivability. We'll look at the DOAs. Excellent shape, only 2% are found dead. Good shape, 4%. Fair shape, 7%. Did I say poor all right? Anyways, there's 12%. So obviously a big difference between the 2%. You could say a 600% difference in survivability between being in excellent shape and poor shape. So I now will have data for the polar domain. If you're familiar with the book, certainly I only talked about the temperate and dry domains, but there's also a polar and a tropical. So snowmobiles, hunters, and falling in the water are the most common types of subject categories. The new book will have a lot more emphasis on scenario analysis, because as I was actually thinking, how do I run a mission when I'm doing planning? It's like, yeah, I look at the numbers, but I also really think hard about the scenario. Why is this person lost? So the basics process is gather information about the subject, look at the scenario statistics, determine which scenarios are possible, focus on those that are more probable, and figure out how it will impact your actual search planning. So, hey, let's do a case. We got 4 18-year-old college students. They hike to the summit of Old Rag. That's what the summit looks like. The subject bets his friend he'll beat them back to the car. He's going to go cross country by running down the summit, and the friends are going to take the trail back. I think we can imagine who got back to the car first and who was the search for. So the subject category is hiker. IPP is the summit of Old Rag Mountain. Destination is the trailhead. Direction of travel is north down a cliff face. Intentions, he does have a rusty compass. Group status is solo. His personality is adventurous, competitive, and a risk taker. Clothing and equipment is jogging shorts, a polo shirt, a wool sweater, old shoes, and a compass. Experience, he was been on one other hike, but no navigation or survival training. Has he been lost before? No. Medical, he's healthy. However, he has a history of 14 broken bones on 12 separate occasions because he is both a daredevil and clumsy. This is not a good combination. Cognitive we'll describe as typical. The various scenarios are the scenarios I've already showed you. So just statistically speaking, flipping to the book, we could see 4 hikers Evading does happen. Investigative does happen. Most get lost. A good chunk are overdue, and some experience trauma. Since he's decided to go down a cliff face, for additional insight, we'll call it, we could look at the climber category. He's not a climber, but we could look at it. And it's like, okay, half of them get lost, a quarter of them have trauma, and then a good chunk of them get stranded, essentially cliffed out. So then we kind of rank the scenarios. 0 chance of avalanches. Low chance of criminal activity. It's the middle of the wilderness, storm fronts moving in, it's miserable out there. It's not where you find criminals. Despondent, nothing that we know supports it, but all we know right now is what we've asked the 4 or the 3 other friends. Evading, I actually put possible because people who get head injuries sometimes become evasive. Investigative, it's always possible. You know, we met a sexy bear out there in the woods and ran off with her. I don't know. Lost is certainly highly likely. Medical is low. Drowning is low. Overdue, it just took them longer to get out. That's certainly possible. Trauma, highly likely. So the next question, actually the question I always ask myself is, so what? Well, it actually impacts upon where I'm going to send resources. So investigative, yeah, get the law enforcement to run the credit cards and do all that stuff. And just see if there was somebody weird hanging around in the parking lot or whatever. Drowning, there's one creek at the bottom of the search area. We should search that because, you know, I'm into searching creeks anyhow. Evasive, it's possible. It just means my searchers need to look. I probably in this case still have them shouting his name, since that is the more likely thing, but they need to keep in mind he could decide to hide or just watch them walk by because he's got either hypothermia or a head injury. Lost, highly likely. He could have gone the wrong direction after he got to the bottom of the cliff. He could have taken the wrong trail once he actually hit the trail. So I got to run the network of trails. Overdue, I need to send a team to just follow his route is possible. And then stranded and trauma, I actually need to conduct a technical search of the cliff face because that's a huge probability. The weather was crappy, so we couldn't have put up a helicopter. Nowadays, we could potentially get a SUV under the cloud cover, although it was raining an inch every 3 or 4 hours. So that probably wouldn't be possible. And he was found like 200 meters away, just he had fallen down the cliff. No great surprise there. There's a scenario planning sheet that I sort of came up with just to help you through this process. I would not use it in the beginning of the search. At the beginning of the search, I just look at the statistical likelihoods. Something like this would come in maybe like 6 or 8 hours into the search. It just, hey, you look up the statistical things from the book, you write them down, you just score them yourself based upon the additional information you have. 0, low, possible, likely, or highly likely. I've seen some people just like in a planning meeting, they'll just put up 1 finger for low and put up 5 fingers for high. That's a way to get it real quick. What's your reasoning? Just so it's documented. And how does it impact where you're going to be sending your resources and what you're going to be doing? There's also what I call the black box scenario. So this was a 49-year-old male. He departs from his cabin to go ginseng hunting. He's supposed to contour or actually illegally trespass on Shenandoah National Park there. And then he was supposed to be picked up right there. And he didn't arrive. This is his own this is his own property in here that he has hunted for ginseng for years. The plan is to contour around, just like I said. IPP right there, destination right there, direction of travel right there. After multiple days of searching, he's not in that black box. And I scratched my head. It's like, why is he not in the black box? And I really couldn't come up with a great answer. I just kind of said, I don't know. That's why I'm calling it a black box. But since we've pounded the black box with resources, he's not in the black box. So he must be outside of the black box. Where would he most likely go? And I said, well, basic behavior, there's lights on, there's a road down here, he knows the thing. So if he goes downhill, this is where we need to search. So I kind of come in to advise on day 3. So on day 4, they send people starting to go down the mountain, and they find his trail of his machete and his hat and his gloves. So he was falling and in some kind of distress. Still hard to know what was going on, but now there at least was a direction of travel. He was eventually found deceased, unfortunately. So there's the standard, how do people get lost? That's the IPP. Hopefully, if they're neurotypical, they are not lost at the IPP, although I can certainly think of some hikers that immediately went the wrong way. They probably got lost because they hit a decision point. They kept going, because if you step off of a trail, you would normally stop once you get off the trail. But something suggests to you, hey, this is the right way. Then they start to make poor decisions at an unconscious level. The brain usually says something is wrong. But at a conscious level, it's like, I am the world's gift of navigation. I can't be wrong. Let me keep going. Then they eventually realize they're lost. There's an emotional response. And then they pick one of the various strategies. So here's our expanded list of decision points. Road intersections, trailheads, trail social trail intersections, trail game path intersections, starts of drainages, anytime a trail takes a relatively sharp turn, switchbacks, sharp turns, saddles, stream confluences, summits, land type transitions. However, there's sometimes you can't find the decision point. Because I've seen hikers who step off the trail for a bathroom break. There's nothing there on the map that says step off trail here for bathroom breaks, unless you have like a trail to an outhouse. So sometimes you're not going to have a decision point. Here we have a hiker. They did a trailhead, road trail down and supposed to come back. So the question I asked myself, is it even possible to miss this turn? We got a sign, we got wooden things. And so it's like, this was a hiker who had been on a 4-day fast. So it's late, hiking, head down. I went out to the site. If I did that, could I miss the turn? The answer was yes. Because throughout the trail, all the way here, they had these logs as erosion control. So just seeing a log wouldn't necessarily alert you to look up and look for the trail intersection. And then, so quite possible to keep going. The history of the area, this is in Great Smokies National Park. History of the areas, somebody misses this turn about once a month. And they would keep going and they would hit the Appalachian Trail here, but the way it's angled like that, almost everybody who misses this turn keeps going this way and wouldn't go back to the way to go get out of trouble. And then by using timelines, I figured out she was about here when it got dark on her. And once it gets dark, as I said, a potential decision point is where a drainage intersects with a trail. They often look like trails, and she wound up getting off the Appalachian Trail, following the creek down, because she was a fine reader of lost person behavior, and she was found right there. So why did she keep going down the trail? it's always hard to say. Here are like the 5 most common cognitive biases. Availability heuristic usually doesn't play too much. It has a tendency to estimate risk based upon how many other examples come to mind quickly. The one that gets, I think, a lot of our missing people into trouble is confirmation bias. That's where you only listen to information that proves you're right, and you ignore information that suggests you are wrong. If I had more time, I can give all kinds of crazy examples of that. One of my favorite is, oh, look, the red needle isn't pointing the direction I think it should be pointing. The compass must be defective. Dunning-Kruger effect is subjects with low ability or limited knowledge or competence greatly overestimate their ability. I think one study among non-pilots was 80% of males thought they could land a commercial aircraft. Optimism bias, that's overestimating good outcomes. I'm sure if I go this way and just keep going, it will all work out. That also overlaps with the sunk cost fallacy. I've already gone this way. I might as well just keep going this way. Realizing you're lost can lead to symptoms of dissociation. So these would be normal reactions to an abnormal situation of being lost. It can actually be like an out-of-body experience. It can feel like you're a different person. You can become emotionally numb or detached. You can have an altered sense of time, which is also going to change your sense of distance. You can't remember how you got someplace. You can start hearing voices, intense flashbacks, feels like you're going crazy, can feel little or no pain, tunnel vision. You can become immobile. You can become lightheaded. Your head feels full. You feel your heart pounding and tingling. So that's probably not going to lead to great decision making. That's why we usually think of searches as a one-way problem versus a two-way problem. So one-way problem is basically we have to find the subject. If they do anything to help us, it's a bonus, but we're not expecting the subject to do anything. As opposed to, say, combat SAR situations is usually considered a two-way problem. If the pilot is still alive, they're probably doing things to try to help the friendlies find them. Then the various strategies, not too much of this is new. There's random walks, that's usually your 1 to 3 year olds. Random walks will move you away from the IPP is the learning point there. People will just pick a direction and try to follow it, but as we can see, some people just will wind up walking in circles, even though they're trying to walk in a straight direction. Lots of people find a route and they follow the route. Some people will see a landmark. They go to the landmark. There's a few people who will backtrack. And then essentially, if you have topology, you can either try to go uphill because there's a view, or you're trying to get a cell phone signal, or because somebody told you that was a cool thing to do. Or you can go downhill because it's easier, or maybe you saw something off in the distance, or somebody told you that was the thing to do. Or the other third option is you contour. You're not going to go up or down, but you're going to contour around because that's the easiest way to travel in the mountains. And hopefully you'll come across something. And if you do come across a road or a stream or drainage, some people may start following that and switch strategies. So how do we navigate in the first place? First of all, there's passive navigation. Your navigator tells you where to go, or your GPS just tells you where to go. That is the least powerful way of building a spatial map. There's piloting or heading for a beacon. You just see something off in the distance and you head for it. And then you head for the next things. I mean, that's how a lot of navigation on the water takes place. There's route finding, We just, that's how we all got here today. We followed a route. If you do that trip enough times, it becomes a learned route and actually goes to a different part of your brain, where if you're not paying attention, you will do that drive to work when you don't even want to go to work. You do enough of that route stuff and you'll build an overall cognitive map, which consists of recognizing landmarks, knowing how to estimate distances, and knowing where everything is in relationship to each other. So human navigation is, and I could actually spend days on this, but we'll just do a single slide. How do we know what direction we are actually looking? We have a vestibular system, and that allows us to do bearings and angular direction. Then we need to calculate distances to know the relationships between. We measure time with our circadian system, but it's not really highly reliable, and it's highly impacted by anxiety. That's something the lost person is probably experiencing. We then measure speed, not that we have built-in odometers, but we have something called optic flow. How fast are things going past our eyeballs? So also landmark recognition helps. Within our vestibular, we can detect acceleration and deceleration. And then within our muscles, your brain, I often joke, how many of you did a pace count here this morning to be able to get back to your car? Nobody did a pace count. However, everybody did a pace count at a subconscious level. Turns out your brain is keeping fast of both how fast your legs are moving and whether you're taking short or long steps. So you have a built-in step counter. And then we also have backup systems that put it all together. So I always had a section on myths and legends. And I was going to remove the thing about, the old Syrotuck donut of, you don't have to look in the middle. You just look at it between the 25% and 75%. I thought nobody believes that anymore. And then I found a bunch of scientific papers that was like, that's how they set up. Pretty much everybody who's designing an agent-based modeling isn't having an opportunity for human input into the modeling system. And I just think that's completely wrong. And I saw somebody say lost person statistics cannot predict behavior. It can't. I cannot tell you where the missing subject is. All I can do is tell you, if there was 100 people who went missing from this location, I would expect to find 50% here, 20% here, 10% there. I'm going to have to add another one, because somebody was recently attending a lecture at a conference and said, Bob, somebody's giving a lecture on lost person behavior. And they said, if you use this, you will find 100% of the people you're looking for. So I text them back, take really good notes, because whoever he is, he's far better at it than me. I usually only promise like 90, 95%, because, we have a 95 percentile. We have statistical outliers. People do really, really weird things. Fortunately, a lot of those people, if you're in a more populated area, walk out and are found alive or found by the public. Search theory doesn't work on land. It's like, well, let's see, what is search theory? Are there areas with higher probability and areas with lower probability? I think we recognize that exists on land. Can we calculate probability of detection on land? Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated, but we can do it. It's like bingo. Those are the main elements of search theory. Oh, here's a good one. A full moon increases the chance of SAR incidents. Is that true or is it false? So based upon data from ISRID, where I think I looked at like, I don't know, 40,000 cases and plotted out the moon and the time, it has no impact. So sorry. No. A new model is the point model. That is just going to give you the stat of how many people are found within 100 meters of either the destination or the IPP. Hopefully everybody in this room and out there in virtual world knows the importance of searching the IPP and the destination. I had to trick the computer into knowing that would be a good place to go and search, hence the stat. So for autism cases, 4% are found within 100 meters of the IPP, and none of them gave a potential destination. So 0 divided by 0, hard to work with. For typically developing children, 13% found within 100 meters of the IPP, and 11% found within 100 meters of the destination. For doing 2 100-meter radius searches, finding 25% of the subjects, that's pretty good payoff. So the last thing I've been kind of working with Jim Russell out of the Virginia is the use of UV lights to find bones. It's the classic, we found a couple of bones, or somebody found some bones, but we haven't found the rest of the bones. Can we use ultraviolet light to find them? Initially in the forensics world, they're using these $2,000 UV lights. We're using a $60 light with also probably the $10 glasses that you need to have if you're working with UV light so you don't fry out your cornea. Because bones phosphoresce. So there you see the bones with a normal flashlight. And there you can see bones, and actually that's a bear claw. So it certainly jumps out a whole lot. So looking at sort of the academic literature, it's like there's a search done during the day, 40% POD. Hey, we're going to do some search theory here. Coverage factor of 0.51. They search with the UV light, which they call alternative light source, because we all want TLAs. That's a 3-letter acronym. And they got a 69% POD. And then they had people search it at day and night and got a 78% POD. And I just said to myself, well, you take the 2 coverages, you add the 2 coverages together, and you combine them, and that would be the expected POD. So it's basically the same thing as far as PODs go. So in Virginia, we've started using UV light on our bone searches. So first case, it was a 3-year-old case, despondent, initially found 73 bones, came in with the UV light, found 10 more bones. A 2-year-old case for an autistic, not recorded what they initially found 9 more bones. Prince George, a 9-year-old case for I don't know what, able to find 2 bones. 4-year-old suicide, initially found 35 bones, came in, found 2 more bones. And a 2-year-old case, who knows, initially just, relic hunter comes back with a skull. It's like, hey, I found this. Went out, found 44 more bones. So from that perspective, you could say, hey, it's working. We're finding more stuff. From a search theory point of view, you go, okay, but anytime you put in more effort, you expect to find more stuff. So are you really finding more than what your daytime search would be versus your nighttime search? So did a sweep with experiment. So during the day, put out large bones, femurs, ulnas, radius. Yeah, I could ask our friend there to demonstrate. Medium-sized bones, ribs, vertebrae, and then the small little bones. It's not every day I get like a prop like this. Where phalanges, metatarsals, the hyphoid, that would be your little stuff. So sweep width value, 23 meters, large bones, 6 meters for for the vertebrae, and for the small little things, you have to be like, that's 20 centimeters or 0.2. At night, same bones, same location, different people, because they've already found the stuff. 32 meters for our large bones, 33 for our medium, and 12 for our small. So that's a pretty dramatic increase. 1 kilometer trail, no time limit, 25 bones were put out there, a range of 0 to 9 meters off of the trail. Of course, a sweep width involves both the left and right. So that's how you get 33 if you have things 20 meters away. There was no concealment. In reality, bones on real searches are often under some leaf clutter. First experiment, 5 searches day, 5 searches night. It's a $60 UV device. What is actually phosphorescing is the tyrosine and tryptophan that is found in the collagen. Previous experiments by academic researchers have found this to work on bones that are at least 100 to 200 years old. There's still some collagen left. Repeated the experiment. More bones were put out there, about the same distances, 16 searchers. So trail A, the large, 15, 6 to 21, 1 to 6, 1 to 21, 6 to 10, 3 to 18. Pretty clear, convincing evidence that this is a powerful tool. I think it's human nature to want to search during the day. So another one of my questions was, were there any bones found during the day that weren't found at night? And on 2 of the 3 experimental trails, there was 1 bone that was found during the day that was not found during the night. So I think it's kind of human nature to say, hey, we search it first during the day. We see what we can find, maybe even mark out some search lanes, and then we come back again and search it at night with the UV. So that's what I've been working on in the last year. Thank you.
We have some questions that came through online. One is, what wavelength UV is used? And someone else responded 385 to 395 nanometers, also 365 nanometers. Is it on there?
It's on there. Yeah, it's the UV Beast uses the 385 to 395.
Great.
That there are other forensic UV sources that use different wavelengths, but that's the UVA Beast is used mostly by common citizens to find scorpions lurking around because they have a lot of collagen.
Jamie posed 2 questions. I think they're related. Is the polygon, this is at the beginning of your slide deck, is the polygon for cell phone as accurate for deceased as for live subjects? And then what's the percentage found in a cell polygon? Is it the same for living dead criminal versus accidental?
The data set had both living and deceased. Since you're just looking at the signal, you're not looking at any behavior. A cell phone is just going to be moved. I haven't crunched. I need to get more data. That's what I always say is I need to get more data. I need to get more funding too. But, you know, with 22 cases, I didn't break it down between living and non-living. My guess is if the cell, you know, if the phone is still, it's, and probably when it got out of the area, it's because you had a living person moving out of the area. But still, it was a mixture of living and non-living if it was in the area. There was another question, I forget what it was.
Peter says, I question your list of missing versus lost. Everyone who is lost is missing, but not everyone that is missing is lost. Is abduction equals lost? I would say they are missing, i.e. they are not where they're supposed to be. In the UK missing person study, we differentiate between lost and missing as more than just semantics as it impacts on scenarios.
I basically agree with what he just said. I certainly agree with everybody who is lost is missing, but not everybody who is missing is lost, because, you know, you had runaways, they're not lost. Throwaways, they're not lost. You know, most of those people weren't lost. When I use the term lost, I pretty much follow Ken Hill's. Well, I use the word lost sometimes just like everybody else does. It's like, it's lost person behavior. It's a very generic use of it really should be called missing person behavior, but we can blame Syrotuck because he called it lost person behavior, so I'm calling it lost person behavior. But when I talk about the scenario of being lost, I actually use Ken Hill's definition of you don't know where you are and you don't know how to get out of the situation. And so you're going to feel panicked because you may die.
Wyatt called, but I was trying to talk to that woman to get him in a wellness
Would like
court.
to know, is there any difference
He'll
in
agree to go.
phosphorescence
He's not
between
that
human
stupid.
and animal bones or different species?
There aren't. So there's going to be a lot of things that phosphoresce out there in the environment. Mushrooms, some types of decaying woods, some types of beetles and animals. However, it's still, you're going to, you know, it's like, oh, something's phosphorescing. You're going to walk over there and go, oh, it's a mushroom. Or it's like, oh, it's a bone. But is it one of those bones from something else that's out there? Or is it human bones and people get advanced degrees on that topic?
Finally, for I think wrapping up the online questions from a couple different people, is the new book and or app coming soon? I'll throw that in there. I think the question at the top of a lot of people's minds.
So I have a slide that different presentation says, good question. Wish I knew the answer.
Is this where you talk about your Falcon?
No, I have stopped collecting new data, except from New Zealand. I got 4 people on payroll to clean their data. They're about 1/3 of the way full. And then I have started writing up the subject categories. I've gotten as far as abduction, which is A. I'm finding I'm turning like what was 2 pages in the original book is probably going to be something like 14 or 15 pages, because there's a lot more research and a lot more statistics. And even I am sitting on more data. As I said, you really should use the EVAC book, because that has data that came in from the NCMEC, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So it really increased the amount of data. And I haven't even bothered to look to see how much data I have now in Israel. But there's a lot of work out there in the literature that is relevant to what we do. So will it be done by 2024? No, but I'm actually going to put a 95% chance that it will be done by 2025. And that's a lot better than, because back in 2013, I started saying I'm working on a book.
All right, are there any questions in the room? Not at all. Okay, well, thank you, Bob. Let's give him a round of applause.